Hello, class. Today we are going to be talking about Lord Byron, the Romantic Poet, by myself, Robert Holland. George Byron, also known as Lord Byron, was born in January 1788 and died at the age of 36 in April of 1824. He was an English poet and peer, and he was one of the leading figures in the Romantic movement and has been regarded as one of the greatest English poets. Lord Byron was educated at the Harrow and Trinity College and later traveled extensively across Europe to places such as Italy, where he lived for 7 years in Venice, Ravenna, and Pisa, after he was forced to flee England due to lynching threats. During his stay in Italy, he frequently visited his friend and fellow poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. Later in life, Byron joined the Greek War of Independence, fighting the Ottoman Empire, and died leading a campaign during that war for which the Greeks revered him as a folk hero. He contracted a fever in 1824 after the first and second sieges of Missolonghi. Byron had several children, but only one legitimate child, who was Ada Lovelace. Byron's two extramarital children include Allegra Byron, who died in childhood, and possibly Elizabeth Lay, daughter of his half-sister Augusta Lay. Byron received the title of Baron by the age of 10. He inherited from his great-uncle. He endured a chaotic childhood in Aberdeen, and he was brought up by his schizophrenic mother and abusive nurse. These experiences, plus the fact that he had a club foot, may have been something to do with his constant need to be loved, expressed through his many affairs with both men and women. It was at Harrow that he experienced his first love affair with both sexes. In 1803, at the age of 15, he fell madly in love with his cousin Mary, who did not return his feelings. This unrequited passion was the basis for his works of The Hills of Ainsley and The Adieu. And while he was at Trinity College, he started experimenting with love. He discovered politics, and he fell into massive amounts of debt, to which his mother said he had a reckless disregard for money. When Byron turned 21, he took up his seat in the House of the Lords. However, the restless Byron left England for the following year for a 2-year journey with John Hobhouse, where he visited Greece and he fell in love with the country and the people. Byron arrived back in England in 1811, just as his mother was dying. While Byron was on his 2-year journey across Europe, he had written one of his famous works, A Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. And it was partially an autobiographical account of a young man's travel abroad. The first part of the work was publicized to great acclaim, where Byron became famous almost overnight. And his celebrity was such that his future wife, Annabel Milbank, called it Byromania. In 1812, Byron embarked on an affair with the married Lady Caroline Lamb. The scandal shocked the British public, and he had also had affairs with Lady Oxford, Lady Frances Webster, and very probably his half-sister Augusta Lay. In 1814, Augusta gave birth to a daughter. The child took her father's surname of Lay, but the gossip was rife that the baby girl's father was in fact Byron. Maybe in an attempt to recover his reputation, the following year Byron married Annabel Milbank, with whom he had a daughter named Augusta Ada. Because of Byron's many affairs and the rumor of his bisexuality, which was illegal at the time, and the scandal surrounding his relationship with Augusta, The couple separated shortly after the birth of their child in April 1816, and then Byron fled England and left his failed marriage and affairs and debts. And then he spent the summer at Lake Geneva with his poet friend Bechet, Shelley, his wife Mary, and Mary's half-sister Claire Claremont, with which Byron had an affair. In 1817, she returned to London and gave birth to their daughter Allegra. Byron traveled to Italy, and in Venice, he had more affairs with Mariana Sagatti, his landlord's wife, and Margherita Cogni, the wife of a Venetian baker. Byron later sold his Newstead Abbey for £94,500, which in today's money would be about $8.2 million. In the autumn of 1818, Byron cleared all his debts, and he was still left with a generous amount of money. In 1819, he began his affair with the Countess Teresa Giucoli, who was only 19 years old and married to a man nearly 3 times her age. The two were madly in love, and Byron moved in with her in 1820. Byron incorporated different styles of writing, including satire, neoclassicism, and romanticism, which shaped his career as a writer. He was also heavily influenced by Greek culture, which is reflected in his poem Childe Harold. In Byron's more satirical pieces, he's best known for his works of Don Juan and the Childe Harold Pilgrimage. Byron borrowed much of his style from Pope Duncade, whose writing is a clear rejection of classical poetry, and during this time, satire was a direct response to the political climate and the outcome of the French Revolution. In many of his poems, Byron was able to harness persona and use elements of fiction and reality to show different points of view. In 1811, he wrote 2 satirical poems, The Hints of Horace, which satirizes contemporary poetry, and The Curse of Minerva, where Byron criticizes Lord Eglin's work for his ignorance regarding Greek history. Byron also uses romanticism, and he uses this with nature as an important romantic characteristic and recurring theme throughout Byron's work. The Prisoner of Chillon uses aspects of nature to express freedom and the unforgiving and harshness reality of the world. In the poem She Walks in Beauty, it was written after Byron was swimming from Sestos to Abydos, and Don Juan also has elements of nature and imagery. She Walks in Beauty is dedicated to the idea that love is unattainable. The female beauty, in particular, is a reference to her complexity, which goes beyond the superficial aspects of traditional beauty. This is further depicted in Don Juan, where Byron mocks the idea of love by giving the main character many love interests. Byron also uses neoclassicism, and he uses that in various social challenges of his time for inspiration for the poetry. He often wrote about kings, queens, fashions, and scandals. Don Juan is a clear example of how Byron incorporated neoclassical elements into his poetry. Don Juan himself invokes neoclassical characteristics because he represents a period when knighthood and chivalry were highly represented in literature. Neoclassicism was also shown in Byron's other work, like Beppo, where he recreates a Hellenic interpretation of a Venetian merchant and his unfaithful wife. In 1823, Byron began growing bored with his life with Countess Giucoli, and he began receiving Greek overtures to join the Greek independence movement against the Ottoman Empire. By July of 1823, Byron had set sail for Kefalonia in the Greek islands. and spent vast amounts of money refitting the Greek army. He spent around £4,000 trying to pay back pay to many of the Greek tribes in order to gain their support to unite Greece against the Ottoman Empire. By December 28th of 1823, Byron had set sail for the Greece mainland and almost got attacked by the Ottoman Empire naval ships, and it ended up costing him days on his journey, in which he had to take roundabout routes to arrive in Missolonghi on January 5th of 1824. Byron tried to continue to unite the tribal leaders of Greece against the Turks and failed at almost every single point, even though he paid vast amounts of money to the soldiers in back pay. While preparing the siege of the Ottoman Empire in February of 1824, Byron began getting sick, and then his doctors began therapeutic bloodletting, which ultimately led to his death by fever in April of 1824. The Byronic hero is a very interesting thing because it's used in a lot of characters from the 19th century and beyond. And the Byronic hero presents an idealized but flawed character whose attributes include great talent, great passion, a distaste for society and social institutions, a lack of respect for rank and privilege, even though they typically possess both. They're always being thwarted and loved by social constraint or death, rebellion, exile, and an unsavory secret past. They usually are arrogant, overconfident, and have a lack of foresight and ultimately a destructive manner. He's also responsible for having influenced over 40 operas, and he's known for being one of the best poets in European history. His self-awareness and personal promotion are pretty much the start of what we see with modern-day rock stars. Some of the composers have even set his poetry to their music, like Beethoven and Rossini. And even recently, as recently as 2020, he's been on a series of UK postage stamps issued by the Royal Mail. Even though Byron never actually succeeded in uniting the Greeks, he is revered as one of the folk heroes, and he is one of the greatest poets and writers of his generation, possibly of all time. He didn't win anything for the Greeks, but he did heavily subsidize their army, which helped them to gain their independence against the Ottoman Empire. Overall, he's responsible for a lot of literary works that we see today and a lot of characters that we see in today's stories. And he's one of the most enduring literary artists of all time. I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation on Lord Byron, and have a great day.